channel. So this episode, I thought it would be really cool to kind of like look back a little bit, take a step back and see where this has come from. I started in roughly 2016 is about when I started building custom bikes, and most of this is going to be pictures, but what I did was I threw together every build that I have done, just me personally, only full builds, not frames, because got about 100 of those, but these will be full builds that I've done. Most of them, like I said, are pictures, because back then video didn't really matter and everything was picture, so I got a lot of that. You guys stay tuned. I'll walk you through each one that I built, kind of what I did, where my head was at when I built it, and hopefully you guys will enjoy. First, we're gonna start off with called this one Lucifer. This was the first from scratch build I've ever done. I even painted it myself. I think I took a Jesse James chopper and I used the triple tree fork off of there, because at the time those weren't easy to get. I think it runs a 26 by 2.5, because at the time that was like crazy wide. That was like really getting into the wider wheels, and a lot of guys weren't doing the wider wheels yet. So hopefully you enjoy. Here goes Lucifer.
Yep guys, my first custom. So this is kind of how I used to do things, is I would lay stuff down on a big wood table and try to figure out how to lay it as flat as possible. When I say that I used to build stuff from nothing, you can see right here that my jig was basically made out of wood and some all thread and some other types of metal to make it work. So when I say, guys, that you can build this stuff, just go out there and try. Just do it. Like, you don't need the fancy tools. You can make it happen. And this is probably still to this date one of my favorite frames. I painted it myself. I did all the body work. Again, I used a Jesse James fork. I built a little sissy bar, like a devil tail, and that was the reason it was called Lucifer.
So yeah guys, that build right there, if anything, will show you that it doesn't take much to build one. You just gotta do it. But next on the list was my first ever commissioned build. The guy ended up turning out to be one of my really good friends now, but we built this one, and it is called Dragon Anchor, and you'll see why.
I can't express to you guys how much fun this was to build, just because it was so out of the box at the time. Nothing like this was ever done. Being able to be super creative, and this was basically a rolling piece of art, right down to the porthole that actually had plexiglass in it, so that it was like a real porthole, using brass nuts on each side for that, just to give it that effect that it's a ship, using a chain to make it look like it's hooked to the anchor. This is still one of the most fun builds that I had ever done, and I kind of would like to get back to doing something like this as a real functioning art style of a bike.
Wondering how heavy that bike was? Massively heavy. I think the back end was made out of 3/16 steel. So when I tried to pick it up off the jig, it was like massively heavy, but it rode. So there was that. Anyway, next one is gonna be the Arachnid. I didn't have a lot of pictures of this, and I don't know why, because I thought I did. I built this years ago, and it was the first frame that I put webs in, and I built spiders for it and all that, but that's why we called this one Arachnid.
Again here guys, you can see kind of how janky my jig was. Nothing really came out super straight from this jig. I think even this frame we had an issue with chain clearance and also ground clearance. The springer would hit the floor. We were able to get that fixed and situated.
That was actually the first frame I'd ever put a lowrider Springer front end on too, which we found out it was too low to the ground, and when you sat on it, it touched the ground. We found out that dog cogs, a dog chew toy, you twist it in there with the spring area, gave me just enough room, and you can actually use it like an airbag. So there's an old school tip for you if you ever want to run a Springer and it's too low. Anyway, next one is going to be a bike that I built for my middle daughter. This was a scrap build. I actually took a kid's bike, broke it apart, used whatever 1-inch tubing I had laying around, used her wheels, put it together. she rode it and she had a great time for quite a while. Check it out.
And the first kids bike I ever did, this was for my daughter. She wanted to ride, and I wanted to make her something custom, and I had an old bike laying around. Basically just cut it up. I used the rims and the crank and the neck from it, and other than that, it's basically a scrap build with a bunch of 1-inch tubing I had left laying around.
Next one is going to be called, or I called it Arachnophobia. So the first one I built was Arachnid. This one was Arachnophobia. I stayed away from putting spiders on it, but I actually put webs in it. This frame ended up being probably 2 different frames prior to what you're seeing here. I ended up chopping the back off because it was too long. The middle section of the bike is because that was a piece of the back. I took the back off and it kind of just fit inside of there. And it was actually a really cool frame. It was my first custom fork that I had ever done with suspension, and it actually traveled, it moved. But check this one out, Arachnophobia.
Alright guys, Arachnophobia. This was one of the bikes I kept. I think I kept this for almost a year and a half or so. This went to Vegas for my first time ever going, and I did the fork on this. I did the bars on it. Everything on this frame I built. Funny enough that when I first built this frame, this isn't what it looked like. The back end was a little too long. I hated the way it looked, so I chopped it off, and that's where that center section came from, over by the bottom bracket. Actually came out really cool, super happy with it. Went out, got it powder coated. It ended up being a different blue than what we wanted it to be, but I love the way it came out. These were borrowed wheels that I took off of a Fat Tire Huffy, and this was just kind of how we did things back then.
Like I said, guys, most of these frames, probably all the way up until the build-off bike, were done on that wood jig. So you can see it, I don't know if you've seen the pictures. I used a piece of wood, lined it up. Nothing was perfectly straight. So if you guys are super concerned with how straight is your frame gonna be, there's wiggle room. These wider wheels, these wider bottom brackets, you guys have some wiggle room. Biggest thing is just trying to get the chain line as straight as possible. Anyway, if you don't know me well enough, I'm a huge basketball fan. I have lots of basketball shoes, watched Michael Jordan ever since I was a little one and I could watch basketball, and that's who I idolized as a basketball player in high school. So I had to build a Jordan tribute bike. I pulled out quite a few cool little stops here. My buddy John cut me some Jordan pieces and got me the 23, and I was able to make the 23 spin, which was really cool. But you guys can check that out.
And this, guys, is my Michael Jordan tribute bike. I've always been a big basketball fan, looked up to him as a basketball player as a kid. So I knew that I wanted to build something that kind of represented that. And this was a bunch of new stuff for me. Using wood as a center tank, being able to bolt that wood in without seeing any kind of screws, adding the Jordan symbol, adding the 23, and making sure that that 23 was going to be able to spin inside the wood. I basically just took a 23 that was cut out for me, and I made it so that the top and the bottom I could drill into it, and then I added some round bar in between those two at the top, and once you put the tank on, it didn't have anywhere to go. Added a little bit of lubrication and it was able to spin. First time using a bobber seat was here, and I used a bike shock to hold that bobber seat up, and it wasn't super comfortable because it was just some leather that was cut into my logo. Somebody did some tooling work for me, and then I riveted it to the metal. So there was absolutely no cushion. This is also running a 2.25 inch wheel, so 2.5 inch wide rim, and we did do some 6 slicks on it, which those are really cool tires. You just get the slick looking tire, kind of like a drag slick. But I did like this bike. I never intended on selling it, but once I got to Vegas, I knew getting it back home was going to be kind of a pain, so I offered it up. Somebody purchased it out there in Vegas, and it's still rolling around today, looking exactly how it does now. You can see here that thing will get spinning like crazy. I just added some wind to it. It moved real easy, spun real easy. I love this build. Like I said, super cool bike. I believe the guy that bought it, he still rides it to this day.
Next up on the list is going to be my first Wrath frame. So I had a production style of frames. I had a Wrath, a Lust, and now I have an Envy frame that you guys know of now. Wrath I haven't done in a long time. This is the first one. I think I did about 8 or 9 of them in total. But this was the very first one. I did a few cool little tricks to that. We were able to, at this time, get a diamond tube fork, which those just weren't a thing then. They were hard to get a hold of. But this one right here, this is the first Wrath.
Yeah, guys, this was my first, what was going to be a production style bike. This one here was my personal one. I wanted to build one up just to kind of show people what it was going to look like. And I think I did quite a few of these. Did the shifter on the side. Some people asked me where I got the shift knob. That is actually a grinder, and if you guys partake, you know what a grinder's for. That's what that does, and I just kind of took it all apart, turned it into a shift knob, used some alt thread, and it worked really well. But I still, to this day, I think this bike is out in Vegas now. It still looks the same. It was a fun build. I do plan on doing some more of these frames because they did really well, so back to it.
And at the same time, when I did the Wrath, I also did the first Lust because I planned on producing just these 2 frames back and forth as much as I could. So right here is a fully finished Lust. This was the first one we ever did. And we took it out to a beach to do a photo shoot with it because it was completely done. I think it turned out amazing. I don't know what happened to that bike as of now, but it turned out really good. Enjoy.
Now, at the same time I was doing the Wrath frame, I wanted to do a lady style frame where this is where the Lust came from. Now, this was also a build that we did, and I wanted it to be a complete build so that we could show what that frame was going to look like fully built. A buddy of mine bought this for his then wife, and we went all out. Wheels, powder-coated spokes, everything was done on this bike. I don't know where it is now, but it was still one of the coolest Lady Lusts we did.
Here's another frame, guys, that we did for the same time that we went to OBC in 2017 for the build-off. I was asked to do a couple frames for Battle of the Bulge, and it was the first time that this was ever done, and it was basically contestants who could lose the most body fat percentage could win the bike. So the buddy of mine that started this up, he came to me, he said, can you do a girl's bike and a guy's bike? And we did. I haven't seen, actually someone does have the guy's bike now, and he is taking care of it, but we hadn't seen it probably since the show. Like, it completely disappeared. Now, this was the first time I ran some round tube and I ran diamond tube together, and the way I ran the front to back upper seat stays was something different than I had seen, so I thought they were super cool.
This bike was so popular out at Vegas that year just because it was something new, running that diamond tube and then running that bottom tube at the bottom. You can't really see it real good in the pictures, but that diamond tube actually comes down, connects, and then runs all the way to the back. That was interesting for me to do because it wasn't easy.
The next 2 you're going to see is what the Envy is today. These 2 look similar to an Envy. We got a round and we've got a diamond tube. These were the first 2 of this rendition, and then I didn't do any more after this until recent, but these were the first how the Envy turned out to be what it is.
And guys, this is when the Envy kind of started to become a thing. I was looking for a frame that I could build that was a good rider. You could use a regular bike seat. I think we were doing a lot of bobber seats at the time, so that's where the Envy started. We didn't call it that yet, but we did this round one here. And then coming up, we also did a diamond tube one. I like to say that both of these bikes are still around, still riding. New owner on the white one here. But again, you can see the similarities to the Envy. I think I ran that seat bar up just a little bit more now.
Andrew, now I can't go without throwing in the 2017 Lowrider and OBC build-off bike that we did here. This was, again guys, built on a wood jig. Like, I can't stress enough how bad my jig was that I was using to build this stuff and how amazing this bike came out. So check it out. Just don't hold yourself back. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Don't hold yourself back. All right. check her out.
Alright guys, in my Vegas OBC Lowrider Magazine build right here, the Day of the Dead build, the Red Death. This was a fun build to do, running a 26x5 rear end, a 29x3 front. Wanted that fork to move. Our intentions were, when we were building this, we were going to plate that fork so that it was also enclosed. Never did it, kind of ran out of time with this build. There's a lot of trick little pieces on here that most people don't even know. The backbone, we did take some square tube, and I bent some square tube up in diamond shape, and then I cut it in half. I used it on the backbone, and I used it on the fender so that it would flow all together. It's kind of hard to see from the picture. Easy Customs did all the paint on this. Only a few things were powder coated, but mostly all paint. Again, one of my favorite builds, and it was really super cool to get into Lowrider Magazine with this one.
Alright guys, this right here was a Star Wars or Mandalorian theme bike. We were able to do some pretty trick stuff on this, like the little Mandalorian logo in there, the gun, all this really cool trick stuff. It was painted by a guy out of Sarasota. He is no longer painting anymore, I don't believe, but he did a really trick job, and here it is, the Mandalorian.
The Mandalorian, yes, this was another really cool build that we did. It's in Canada now. The paint on this, unbelievable. The guy that did the paint job out of Sarasota, he did all of this by hand, went through to make it look just like the Mandalorian, or look like it came from Star Wars. Even being able right down to attach the gun on there, which was something super cool, because it wasn't, I couldn't figure out how to get the gun on there, and it's actually held on there by really, really strong magnets, so pretty neat.
That bike is in Canada right now, so super cool bike. I think probably one of my only builds that are in Canada. So there you go. My last build before I took a year off because I was burned out. This was a diamond tube frame. I did the frame, I did the fork. It was set up on 29s. I don't have a lot of pictures of it, and I actually never got to completely finish it all the way. It stayed raw material for probably the couple months that I had it and I wrote it, and I don't even have a name for it, but here it is. This was right before I took my year off.
I honestly don't have a whole lot about this one. I built this, I built the fork, I rode it around for a little while, but at this time my head was somewhere else and I just wasn't really into it anymore.
And my comeback bike. A lot of you have already seen this bike, but I came back and I wanted to do something different, and I was going to do things different. I was going to just change the way that I was going to build, and this was the outcome.
Now this build was my comeback. I went to a buddy's house who was also a really good fabricator. He wanted to build some bikes with me, and I said, let's do it. We ended up building two different frames. They almost look similar, except for the rear ends are different, and I ran a center bar where he didn't. But this bike, the way it sits, I want to duplicate because I love how low it is. I like how the front wheel sits, because that's a 26, but it appears bigger. So this was a great build for a comeback. Powder coated, finished it, rode it around forever. Definitely one of my favorites.
So that was, like I said, that was after taking a year off and just letting everything settle and coming back to it and really trying to be more creative. I think the next build also did that. A buddy of mine hit me up, the same guy that I did Dragon Anchor for. He said, I want you to build something, and I don't really care what it is, I just want you to build it. Here, you build it, here's the money. So I did that. I built it, I finished it. It was supposed to go to OBC that year, and I guess something had happened where they didn't end up going, and he actually messaged me, and I was like, hey, the bike's ready, what do you want to do? He said, keep it. It's for you, keep it, enjoy it. It's something you wanted to build. And I did. I enjoyed that bike for almost a year before I finally sold it to help expand the shop some and do some other things. But this one is known as Trypophobia.
And Trypophobia. I think I'm saying that right. Yeah, sounds good. Anyway, if you have a fear of holes, here you go. You're welcome. This right here ran a 29x3 in the front, 26x4 in the rear. Tank, everything made from scratch. awesome build. Even the bars were something new for me. Yes, I did take that design from old motorcycle bars, but I actually made those. Had my buddy John cut out the bracketry so that we could run those bars.
So super sick build again. Loved the color, loved everything about it. I believe that bike is in Detroit, maybe? Not sure. Used to be. Whatever. Anyway, next one is my board tracker build. This had a couple different renditions on the tank, but this is the final view of it. It still looks the same as today as it did then. This was kind of a cool build for me. I really kind of just winged it as I went, but I wanted that board tracker style. I think we nailed it.
And who doesn't like a good board tracker, raw steel looking build? I actually replaced this tank here. This is the new version of the tank. With the first tank, I tried to run some mesh. Just wasn't feeling it. We went with 2 different sets of bars on this build just because I really couldn't figure out what I liked. When I ran the board tracker style bars, it looked really cool, but it hurt your back to ride because you were leaned over the entire time. You also couldn't turn real well because the bars would run into the tank. So we went between that and we went between some mini apes. Kind of went back and forth. I still think this was the best looking design, was with the upside down cruiser bars.
Now we've got my Lust. This is when I started bringing the Lady Lust build back. This was the first round tube Lust that I've ever done. And I am going to do more, but right now this is the only one out there.
Again, just a quick round tube Lust. We went ahead, we ran a single speed on this. We did some cool powder coating. This build came out really sick.
Alright guys, and this one right here, I don't even have a name for this one. For the first Florida Bike Fest, I knew I needed a build, and I had this frame half done. So I thought, you know what, let's go ahead and build it. I contacted Robert Messenger, who was a painter that was here, and I said, hey, do you want to collaborate a little bit? You do the painting, I'll get some powder done, and we'll do this up. And here's what came from that.
Now when I was building this, I had no clue what I was going to be doing, but I had some dimple dies that were just burning a hole in me to use. I wanted to also try some stuff with these fenders. This is actually a front fender for a motorcycle for a Harley. You can take these small fenders, they fit the 26x4 perfectly. Did do the fork for this build, I did the bars for this. You guys know me, how much I hate doing round tube bars. The fork was super simple, just a round tube triple tree fork, and then I kind of added that little decorative piece to the front. Robert Messenger killed the paint job on this. It came out so good. He did the wheels, the tank, the seat, and the back fender and the headlight there, as you see. The rest of it was powder coat done by Profab Powder Coating. This is running a 29 by front and a 26 by 4 in the rear. These were the wheels that came off of Tripphobia, because when I sold that, it was shipped out. He only wanted the frame, he did not want the wheels. So we reused them, repurposed them, made a pretty sick build. I was able to take this out to the Florida Bike Fest, the first one, and it did pretty well for being something that I never actually planned on building in the first place.
It's a pretty sick bike. I think that one is actually on the other coast of Florida now, so it's still around. Next on the agenda is going to be Smooth E. This was my first try at electric. We ended up hooking up with Golden Motor, and they sent me a 1,000-watt wheel battery combo and everything I needed to make this. It was intended to be almost like a scooter that you could sit on. The scooter part doesn't work all that great, but it does go about 30 miles an hour, so there's that.
This right here, guys, was my first go at anything electric. Again, thanks to Golden Motor, who supplied everything for this build. The intentions of this was to be a scooter and a bike, basically to be able to ride it. And if you couldn't ride it because the battery went dead, you could use it as a scooter. That actually didn't work out so well because of how heavy this is. This is a 1,000-watt rear hub, and that back wheel has to weigh in the ballpark of 40 pounds, maybe. So it was a little heavy, a little hard to ride without the power, but with the power, we're doing about 35 miles an hour in this bad boy. It gets a little sketchy when you get up to those higher speeds, but it's a smooth, fun ride. This thing handles amazingly. Everything's packed into the bottom of the frame there, so the battery, the tail light, everything you need, even the underglow, is all packed into that bottom part there. I really thought this was going to do better than it did on YouTube. Didn't get a whole lot of views, didn't do real great, but still a really fun build, and I kind of want to do another one or something similar with using the 1500 watt or 1000 watt wheel again. I think I kind of want to do maybe a board tracker or a cafe racer style build with using this style again. And I think I want to go 1500. Let's give it all the beans, give it all the power, and see if my welds hold up. Yeah.
Still like that build, still have it. It'll be gone soon, but I still have it. Next one's going to be Ryoko. This is the one where I used, I think, 700 spoons in order to make the scales. If you guys seen that build, you got to check it out. Super proud of that build. My buddy Eddie at Easy Customs painted the fender. He painted the scales for me to give it that flopping illusion. Without a doubt, one of my favorite builds to date, Ryoko.
And if you guys remember this build, this was the build that we were doing for the second annual Florida Bike Fest, where we actually had a build-off, and I was going up against Lance Tudor, who's been doing this years longer than me. He's an amazing builder, and I knew I kind of needed to bring it if I was going up against him. Didn't bring enough because I did not win, but I was super happy with this build, with the amount of detail and what I put into it. Today, still, the center section of this frame is probably one of my favorites. The way that it sits low to the ground, it almost sits inside of the front and back wheel instead of on top of it. And I would like to build more frames of this style. You can see here how it kind of sits and how that bobber seat fit perfectly up against that big bagger fender. That fender is from a bagger. These scales are from spoons. I actually took spoons, went to the dollar store, wiped out their spoons and took all the heads off of them, ground each one down to a point to make them look like dragon scales. Had my painter Eddie with Easy Customs go in and use a flip-flop paint. This powder was expensive. I think the flip powder probably cost like 30 bucks for this little teeny like dime bag of powder. He did add some gold leaf in there to give it that kind of like dragon eye look to it. John cut out the dragon for me, and as well as the dropouts, he cut those for me too. Everything else I kind of did from hand. I wanted to do the round tube and have a little bit of diamond to it because I knew I was going to be building the bars for this, and I wanted to make sure that if I was going to do bars, I would do diamond tube bars because, again, they're a lot easier. You can really see in the pictures here how that flop paint went. You can see at the bottom there, we added a dragon egg. I had a buddy of mine 3D print out a dragon egg, which we stuck a speaker inside of there for the show, so that you could actually hear the dragon growl. As you see, guys, I ride the bikes. I hear so many times, especially on other social media platforms, that our bikes aren't rideable, they're too heavy, blah, blah, blah. I rode this thing probably, I want to say 10 miles that day, up and down the Pinellas Trail, and it did just fine. Rode super smooth, having those bigger 29s. That's a 29x3 front and a 29x4 rear. And I think we did a 72 spoke straight lace Nexus 3-speed. I do tend to run a little bit of a smaller crank, which makes it a little easier to pedal. You're not going to have the torque up top though, so you could kind of start to out pedal yourself, if that makes any sense. But that's how I like them. These are bigger, heavier bikes, and having a smaller crank allows you to take off a little easier.
Beautiful bike, and as you guys can see, I rode the thing. It can ride. I get a lot of comments that say, well, your bikes are too heavy, can you even ride them? I can ride every single one of the bikes. They all ride. They are functioning rolling art. Yes, they're heavy, but they're geared to ride. Enough I'm going to say about that. Anyway, next bike's going to was my wife's surprise build. I wanted to do something for her because I sold her bike already. Not that she rides much, but I wanted to do a cool build so that she would be in the same category with me when we were rolling around. I wasn't just rolling around on the cool bike and she had that. So made her a cool bike. I think she rode it twice before it got sold, but here it is.
And on to the surprise custom that I did for my wife. Reason I called it a surprise because she had no clue that I was building this one for her. I wanted her to have a custom bike, so when we were out riding, it wasn't just me getting all the attention and having the cool bike, that she would have one too. Now granted, she doesn't ride much, she's not really into it, she doesn't care. So this kind of went to waste. It sat in the garage for a while. I think she rode it like once, and that was for this video, which you'll see here in a second. But I got a lot of issues, or not issues necessarily, but a lot of comments on the internet of people thinking that we were going to get hurt on this fork, that you were going to flip over the handlebars and it was going to impale you and you were going to die. That's what I was being told. Didn't happen, guys, just so we know. I'm good to go. Nobody got hurt in the making of this bike.
So yeah, that was a pretty cool bike. I got a lot of talk on the interwebs about the fork. People swore that you were going to get hurt on this fork. I don't know why, but anyway. Next build's going to be a personal build. It was supposed to be my personal bike that I built for myself that I could easily get in and out of the truck. It was a little bit more compact. Ended up selling it because I think I sell everything, but this was my personal build.
And my personal build, the reason I called it my personal build was because this bike was supposed to just be for me. This was the first frame I ever completely TIG welded the entire frame. And I didn't want to really let it go because I was worried that with me being a novice TIG welder that I may have caused damage to the frame in some way, and if it cracked I didn't want anybody else to deal with it. Good thing is, it's still riding around to this day. It's now an orange color. It has an adjustable seat. It was definitely made more to be a rider, not just a showpiece. You could ride this thing as long as you wanted. This build right here, guys, did really well on YouTube, or at least the one I did before this. This is a stretched limo. These are basic bikes that you can buy off of Amazon or on the internet anywhere. And what I did was I call a drop-in chop. Basically, we're just chopping the bottom of it off. We're taking off the rear chainstays and we're adding our own. This was actually a fun frame to build because the top portion is already done. You're just taking out the bottom pieces of it, and I think by doing this, it really accentuates the frame and makes it look way better. We were able to add a root beer powder coating, lots of brass, lots of mixed metals, which is something I love to do. Love the way that the brass bounces off of this root beer powder coat. And this was actually raffled off, and the winner is up in northern Florida, and I shipped it out to him after the raffle was done, and he's enjoying it.
Another bike I did that did very, very well here on YouTube and all over the internet was the patinaed cruiser style that I did. I really wanted it to give it that C10 old school patina look. I think we nailed it. We did some dimple dye. That was the first time we introduced bead rolling into the situation. Worked out great. I love this bike. It's over in Texas. Chuck, the wheel guy, he's got it now, and hopefully he'll keep it forever.
Still, without a doubt, one of my favorites. This build right here is my top YouTube video at 35,000. So that was pretty cool to see, and I don't know what it was about this bike, or if it was just the picture in general, the thumbnail that drew people in. But this was a sick build. This was my first time being able to use the bead roller and adding it and incorporating it into the build. Again, guys, if you would like your own bead roller, make sure you use that code Seberg10 over at eastwoodcompany.com. and they'll save you some money there.
Next one I did was very similar to the patina build, where I just added a lot of brass. I switched up the rear end some, and I did a little bit different tank and how the tank's actually mounted. We don't have a name for it. That bike is also now in Texas. I can't wait to see what they do with it because we didn't powder, we just kept it in metal. Here she is.
Not a whole lot to say about this one. This one also did pretty well on YouTube, and I love, again, my mixed metals, my brass, rolling that bead roller, and those dimple dyes, baby.
And lastly, guys, is the e-bike I just finished. That is the last build I think I'm going to be doing for this year. It takes a lot to build these, and I think as of right now, if we're going since 2016, that's 25 builds. So that's a lot of builds for me to do. Right now I'm just gonna focus on doing some frames, get some of those sold, and probably just take some time off. Not gonna take a year off, but I am getting to that point again where it does feel like it's getting burned out, and being down here isn't as much fun as it used to be. And I don't want that to happen, so I'm gonna catch it before it becomes an issue, take a little break, take some time off, not take this stuff so seriously, and then maybe come back with a clearer head. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the little rundown memory lane and that it gives you guys some input on how to do these things and not be so scared to do them because you don't have the proper tools or you don't have what we have here. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, stay tuned for more, and I will see you real soon. Later.
And on to my latest build. If you guys missed it last month, that was this build here. Made a few changes off and on, just doing different things that I wanted to do. First time ever using a mid-drive. I love this bike. I've actually ridden it all over the neighborhood, anywhere that I can. I've got a few more touches I'm going to be doing. Just ordered a front fender for it because I feel like it really needs it. I think I'm going to do a carbon front fender. But other than that, guys, as you can see, this is a rider. I'm riding it. It's not fast by any means. It goes about 15 miles an hour. And that's because I'm guessing it's because it's a little heavy for the mid-drive, but I'm okay with that. I have the torque turned way down because I don't want it ripping the Nexus off. Well, anyway, guys, I want to thank you for watching. Please make sure you hit that like, comment, and subscribe for me. Stay tuned for more, and I will see you real soon.